Good evening, Wayne Summers. You volunteered to be interviewed for Men on a Narrow Road, and you are okay with this going on YouTube. Is that correct?
That is correct.
All right, good. Well, I'd like you to begin at the beginning. I'd like to hear how you grew up, where you grew up. Tell me about your family.
All right. I grew up in central Pennsylvania, a small town called Mount Union, Pennsylvania. I grew up in a Christian home. My parents both were heavily involved in the church. But let me go back even further than that to my grandparents on both sides. My mother's grandparents, and it really plays into the story later. They were godly people, but on the very quiet side. But they were so instrumental in the church. My grandfather was a board member in the church, and I'll get the number wrong, but it was well over 40 years that he was a deacon in their church. Very quiet man. I said up front. I spent a lot of time as a young man in their home, so I knew that they were prayer people because I heard my name being called out. So you can see already from that, I was born into advantage for the gospel. Mm-hmm. My other grandparents, my grandfather Summers, was not a ordained licensed minister, but there's a lot of ministers out there that my grandfather was someone that would speak to everyone in a way that he could somehow, some way sneak in the word Jesus to them. He was an evangelist on the street corner in the church. He was instrumental in the church. Now they were, even from the time I was young, my grandparents split their time between where they lived there in Mount Union and also down here in the Harrisburg area because my aunts lived down here, and also out in California. And he actually was quite instrumental out there at leading many people to the Lord. And again, I knew what the power of prayer was. My grandparents were very instrumental in the church, bringing life into us, speaking words of life into us. I can't remember my grandparents ever saying a cross word to me, although we deserved it. I deserved it at times. I know that.
What were their names?
Charles and Florine Knable was my mother's side, and my grandfather on my father's side was Samuel and Helen Summers. So they actually attended First Assembly when they were here in the area. Mm-hmm. And so because they would stay with my aunt Ann and Bob Emmerich.
Yeah, I know them.
Yep, and I have other aunts too. Joyce Frack. They were all pretty instrumental in the Assemblies of God. We were all Assemblies of God whenever I was a young lad, born into it. And then you go into my parents. My mother was a pianist in the church. My dad was deacon on the church boards, secretary. Back then you didn't wear one hat. You wore as many as they could get on your head. Mm-hmm. The church was 200 people, somewhere in there. It was a good sized church for, small town atmosphere. Our church, grew as they could. I could even go into the ministers' names that I got to sit under. Even as a young man, I remember a little bit of what I was taught under the ministry from some real key people in the ministry. So I was born, I guess, with a silver spoon when it comes to the way I feel about it. Hearing other people's testimonies and the things that they had to go through, I feel so blessed that I was afforded the opportunity to live in a godly home. And quite honestly, it was. I count it now as I'm older, certainly a blessing. And One of the most powerful testimonies I ever heard was out of a fella that said, I didn't have to go through Teen Challenge. I didn't have to go through other things because at an early age, I was steered towards God. My story is like that, but it's not similar because I rebelled and didn't always follow God as I should have.
Oh, well, I'd like to hear. I'd like to hear about that when you're ready.
Yeah. Well, let me go through even my parents. I give there's certain things in life that I feel that God just pours out blessing and favor on your life, and to have grandparents and parents that serve the Lord is another blessing. Now I know it's my testimony, but I got to put this one in because Nancy and I we are hooked at the hip. I mean, we're a team. We'll be married 47 years this year.
Wow.
And it was, but to go back to the blessing and favor, God seen that I needed a helper, and He knew I needed a lot of help, is what He knew. And so He gave me the perfect girl. And I'll tell her not to listen to this because she'll think I'm scoring brownie points, but she knows. I do tell her this, probably not often enough, but I do tell her this. The favor of God was on me so much that He gave me a wife that was also godly. Not that she's a saint or didn't fail or go through things herself, but God gave me someone exactly what I needed, and it was her. And so the testimony that I have through that is God has granted to me in my lifetime people that just kept surrounding me with His love and pulled me closer to Him, even when I was rebelling and having problems listening to the way I knew that I should go. So the favor of God was on me, even at that.
Any brothers or sisters?
I have one brother. He passed away when he was 51 years old. And I have two sisters, one in Cleveland, Tennessee, and one lives up in State College. My mother's still alive. My father passed away 8 years ago. Mm-hmm. So that's testimonies too. I mean, some of the stuff I've always been shown. My grandfather Summers was 85 years old when he passed away, and he was taking a lady from the Harrisburg area. My grandmother had already passed away, and a lady wanted to go to Anderson, South Carolina. My grandfather was in great shape. He didn't have gray hair in his head, and he said he never used Grecian formula. We always kidded him. He had a full head of hair. I don't know where mine went. Well, my other grandfather was bald, so I blame it on him. But my grandfather was a witness, and he tried to be a helper to everyone. Well, he took a lady down there. Well, he got in a car accident, not severe, but he got in a car accident, and the arm of the car reached over and hit him in the ribs. Well, they took him because of his age to the hospital, and while he was in there, now this is what the doctor was telling my father to, the testimony of my grandfather sitting in the emergency room. They were coming to work on him because he was having some chest pain, and he said, no, there's people over there that need you right now. And he was witnessing. He wanted time to witness to a young lady that was helping him out, and in the meantime he slumped and he passed away.
Wow. What a way to go.
Yeah, I'm telling you. And, I was mad at God for that, though. I was mad because I seen how perfect of health he was. And for a short period of time, short period as in 3 or 4 weeks, I was very upset that God took my grandfather. And I was talking to one, Sam Mayeski was our pastor up here at Glad Tidings when this happened. And Sam came to me and he said, Wayne, you're struggling. Yep. And he said, let me tell you, he goes, would you rather your grandfather have passed away with cancer or any other thing? He goes, rather than the way he went. And that sort of snapped me out of it. Mm-hmm. And so that's a witness there that I got to breathe into my life. I got to see that witness. And also on my father had cancer in the early 50s, and he Actually, through the whole thing, John Hopkins, Hershey Med, and Geisinger, all three of them said, you are too far gone. We cannot operate. All three of those hospitals said they couldn't do anything. Well, my dad said, well, I guess, if you can't do anything, you can't do anything. He didn't really worry about it. He was on the golf course up at in State College talking to a buddy of his, and he goes, I got a buddy of mine's a surgeon over at Hershey Med and in Hershey, and he goes, let me give him a call. One long story short, they operated. He had prostate cancer. He lived for another 24 years, but it came back, and he had severe bone cancer that was going up into his neck and in all through his spine and everything. And the whole time he was like telling everyone, I'm not going anywhere until they tell me. Well, Dwayne Nicholson and Wade Wilson was actually over at Hershey Med whenever they gave us the news that he had 2 days to live. Well, my dad was sitting up. Matter of fact, he said, oh, I'm going home. He said, dismiss me, discharge me and let me go. And he goes, and we'll see how long God got for me, because he just the whole, they come in with the whole team, and he just dismissed it. And the witness part of it was he lived for another 4.5 months after that. Wow. And they gave him 2 days. And so I got to see this firsthand, up front, and visual. So you can imagine the impact that has on my life, the positive aspect of living your life that we're not guaranteed of tomorrow, but but we know who holds tomorrow. So I don't want to go on too much about that, but family setting wise, I was blessed so abundantly. It was unbelievable. And then to have a wife and that loved me and kept after me. Matter of fact, let me throw a story out there. And this is and I know it'll be on YouTube, for anyone that is either newly married or married in general. If you can do these things, I'll guarantee you, I have this surefire remedy of no divorce in a family. I'm telling you, it's a surefire way. And this is not easy for men, especially men. It's easier for women, I'm told. My wife, for years and years, even when I was, well, I'm getting way ahead of my story, but for years and years, I was asked by Nancy, will you pray with me? Will you pray with me? And I always put her off some way, somehow. I mean, not that we didn't do it sometimes. We were always people that prayed at the table and, would pray over a need or whatever. But I was a worship leader, a deacon in the church. I had all these advantages that I knew about. And quite honestly, every time she asked me, I became ashamed. I left the pride of the enemy defeat my spirit and say, you're supposed to be the head of the house. She's taking that headship from you, and she's asking you to do these things, and I let that sink into me. I actually rebelled against that. And she kept on me and on me. She'll confirm that it actually took years until finally one time she reached over and she grabbed my hand in bed, which is, and she said, will you pray with me tonight? I really need you to pray with me. And for some reason, I started praying with her. We have never looked back. And I'm telling you, if a person can grab hold of the one that they love the most, and they can just touch God together, he comes down in an even more powerful way, that he will make things that are stressed. He'll take the strain off of them. He'll take the stress off of them. He'll take the pride out of life. And I said it was harder for a man. And I think it's because sometimes we feel like we should be the headship, and we're failing at it. And so the enemy comes in to play a part there.
Shame on you, Wayne Summers.
I'm telling you. From Nancy, from our life together, we started pretty much from the time we got married. We went to work. I worked out in Nazareth, Pennsylvania, on a very large dairy farm out there. and then I left there and actually became a herdsman on a pretty good sized dairy farm. Also, I had learned all the ins and outs of the milking end of it, and DHIA, which is a Penn State affiliate of it, and some people know it's the way to manage a herd that you'll get the most production out. And I actually, the Lord blessed me in that, and I was fairly good at it.
Were you a Christian at that time?
Well, supposedly, we went to church. We
Okay.
had an awesome minister out there too. Fred Doherty was his name, an Irish feller. And I said feller because that's how his son said, my dad's a feller. But I'm telling you, he was. But to go on there, talk about favor of God. There's a man there that didn't know us from Adam. But Nancy and I moved that area, brand new, newlyweds, and he sort of pulled us right into the church setting. It was an Assembly of God church, but he pulled us right in, and he knew I played trumpet. Well, he didn't know I knew I played trumpet. They were having a talent night one night, and they were having their band together, and a fellow there had an extra trumpet. And whenever I went up, I said, you got a extra trumpet there. And he goes, "You play?" I said, "A little bit." And I started to play. Well, I never looked back from there. They left me go in. So, but he drew us in and kept his hand on us somewhat, still being young and ambitious. And also another thing too, I might want to point out, even though I grew up in a godly home, it seemed ritualistic and also legalistic to me. In the day, to go roller skating or bowling was a sin. Probably not so much, but it felt that way anyway. It just seemed like everything you did was a sin. And I'm not blaming anything on, I'm the one that rebelled. I did that. So to say we're a Christian, I would say probably not so much.
Okay.
And then moved to this area. I worked on a herd down in 3 Mile, and actually it was 3 Mile and test herd. I worked there for a year, and that I knew I was going to get out of that. And I went to work for Yellow Freight, which turned into YRC Freight, and I worked for them for 35 years till I retired 7 years ago.
Wow.
And I still work part-time for an electrical company. 3 days a week gets me out of the house.
You don't make many changes. 35 years in one job, 47 years with the same woman.
Yeah.
Good for you.
Yeah. Well, I had example of that. My one grandfather worked 49 years for Harbison Walker Brickyard, and the other one worked 52 years for North American Brickyard in the same town, and they were competing. So and my father, I should have finished the stories on there. My father owned a chain of furniture stores and a Honda motorcycle shop. So me and my brother were always set up for success on the motorcycle. So we spent a lot of time there. But my dad always had the calling on his life to be a minister, and actually late in my years at being good grief, I lost my train of thought. My dad became a minister in the Church of God whenever I was 16 or 17, Church of God Pentecostal. And he took a church over in Bellefonte. I graduated from Mount Union High School, but it was that he had the calling in his life, and he pastored for many years over in the State College area. So
wow, Brother B started that church.
That was the Assemblies of God. My
I'm
father
sorry.
was the
You're
Church
right.
of God, Pentecostal. Yep.
You're right.
Yep. And when my father, the churches were intertwined. The Assemblies in Milesburg is the church Brother B started. But the churches were intertwined. But Brother B had already moved on from there. So, like Eisenhower's mother was one of the founding members of that church.
Wow.
Yeah.
Small world.
Yeah. Yes, it is. So first time I received Christ into my heart was 11 years old at a kids camp in Cherry Tree, Pennsylvania. Now, my mother was very involved in the youth camps and children's camps whenever we were growing up. We were always the first one in the camp, and we were usually the last ones to leave the camp. And they had a week in Cherry Tree, and they had a week in Maranatha. We also spent usually at least 1 week in Potomac, Maryland. No, Maryland was not in the Pendle district, but my father had really close friends that were ministers down in the Potomac district. And so we ended up down there for camp. Not only me and my brother going to youth camps, but also to my parents going to family camp. So that's what vacations consisted of for us, was going to camps. We had a blast. I mean, you know, they were fun.
Good.
We didn't miss anything there. So the first time I accepted Christ in my life was at Cherry Tree. And I remember, I don't know the date of it, but I remember the minister, and his name was Dave Colonen.
Really?
I'm telling you, he had the conviction going on, and it was real. It was real. Mm-hmm. I knew at that point that God had his hand on my life. I knew that. And there was no getting, even though I rebelled later in my life, I still knew that God was with me. Mm-hmm. And so we went from there, and coming back to this area here, where when I started working for Yellow Freight, we started to attend Glad Tidings in Middletown, where after a short time there, I began playing my trumpet almost immediately in their orchestra. And a short time after that, started leading worship. I really didn't care for being a deacon. I really didn't want to know the business of the church.
Yeah.
And some of it's really exuberant and really good, and some of it I just didn't like. And so mm-hmm. I can't say that I didn't do everything to the best of my ability on that, but to say that I liked it, that was my calling to get into that was not for me. That wasn't it. I prayed.
How old were you at the time?
Oh, I would have been, I was probably 27, 28.
Okay.
Yeah. Early, but I knew a lot of the newer courses, and I was horrible at doing hymns. Matter of fact, I didn't like hymns, because when I grew up, that's all that was in the church. Mm-hmm. There was a few courses, but they were the chorus of the hymn that was written. And okay. So I really didn't care for that. So whenever I got into it, Glad Tidings in Middletown was already doing some of the newer things, and I knew those, and I was able to take them into even some music that they weren't. And I did that for, I'm going to say 17 years, maybe.
Wow.
Yeah, it was quite a while.
35, 47, 17. We got a lot of longevity going here.
Yeah. We maybe it wasn't quite 17. It was 15 to 17 years. Yeah. At that same time, Nancy and I, in between youth pastors, we also were leading the youth. We led the youth for probably a couple years. Powerful youth group. And it was powerful before we got it, and we think it was powerful after we left it. A lot of full-time ministers.
You didn't. That's great. You didn't tell us how you met Nancy.
Well, that's a story left to her to tell. She didn't like me at all. Matter of fact, up where Nancy lived was the last house up on the mountain. It was awesome up there. The day me and my buddy drove up there, well, I didn't even know anything about it. I jumped in the truck, and my buddy says, "Hey," he says, "I heard there's a sled riding party up on the mountain." And he goes, "You want to go up?" I said, "Yeah, let's go up." You know, and we get up there, there's a bonfire and people, kids, you know, everywhere, and they had things going. They were having a blast, and I thought, oh, it's pretty good. Well, we got to joining in, and I thought, me and my brainiac idea, I thought that I could make us go faster. So I was telling some of the people, Nancy's sister and Nancy and some of the other ones that are around, hey, if we did this, we'd do that. Well, Nancy said, she didn't say anything. She just walked away from me like, you're a jerk, and nobody invited you anyway. And so first impressions are really good. And so anyway, it was a pretty cold night, and we went in the house, and they were having hot cocoa and stuff in there in the house, and went in there, and I seen, hey, that's pretty nice looking little filly there. I better ease up on my and see how this is. Well, we met. Well, she didn't take too kindly of me trying to help out, and so she told me. She goes, you're a little pushy, and I said, I'm sorry. Well, I won her over. I don't care what she says. I won her over.
Did you win her over or wear her down?
Either way, I do tell her this. I do tell her this all the time. I married up, and she married way down. So it's her fault. But no, I got a gem. I got, like all of us should feel about our wives, for
Praise
sure.
the Lord. Yep.
Yep. I give him all the honor and the glory for that, because if it was on my own, I'd have certainly messed it up. So we went into the youth group. We did that ministry. We both taught Sunday school. Nancy taught third graders. They wanted her to teach. They wanted her to teach adult, and she said, I can win more lives teaching young children.
Wow.
And she told the pastor that, and he goes, you're in the second and third graders. He goes, that's where we're putting you. And so I thought that was because she told him, she goes, they have a lifetime to win souls. And so she was the WM's president for some years there. She went to the meeting. They wanted her. Nancy can make flower designs, like for on walls and baskets and stuff. Just a self-taught thing, and she made beautiful flowers in the church. She actually made flower arrangements for in the church and everything. And the women of the church wanted to know how to make them, and they invited her. I think it was a setup, but they invited her to that. Well, lo and behold, that was also the night they were voting on the president for the WMs. Nancy had never attended.
Yeah.
Her wheels were spinning in so many directions. She really, that was something she didn't attend. Well, she came home, she was the president, and I'm like, pretty good move there, dear.
Yeah.
But God's always had his hand on us, and we I can't say that we were blessed and favored any more than I tell people that my demeanor in church is not the cup is half full. That cup is running over, because that's what the word tells us, that we are blessed beyond the curse.
Yep.
There's nothing that our God can't do.
You're
and
right.
we have to stand on that word. And call it out, as even if it isn't, call it out as it is. And I know that throws people for a loop, that, well, you're overzealous. I'm telling you, I don't know you can get overzealous about the things of the Lord. I think you can turn people off if you go bonkers. But as far as giving him honor and praise in a genuine fashion, I don't think God desires anything less.
Yeah.
I think he wants that. So we went from that. I was on the deacon board, like I said, for more years than I really wanted to be, leading worship. Even when I wasn't leading worship, well, usually I led worship a lot of years in that church that we were there. I think we were there 23 years, maybe 22 years. And then our daughters actually got married Julie was the first one to get married. Well, she was the second one married in the new sanctuary, our new sanctuary. But
Really?
Nancy and I had attended CLA when it was a small, when it was in the small sanctuary, 1,100 people. Yeah.
Right.
So here's another blessing of the Lord. Pastor Paul's been a family friend forever.
Mm-hmm.
Love him. Got to sit on the mountain and hear his stories. There's not a lot of people that got what I got. I
No,
mean,
you have been blessed in that respect.
yeah, and he has spoke life into my life, and I'm telling you, the hand of the Lord. I can't stress it enough that even though all that favor was on, there was still a time in my life where I failed God, where I
Mm-hmm.
wasn't serving Him, where I wasn't living wholeheartedly
Mm-hmm.
for Him.
So
And
what got you back in harmony with him?
well, for a lot of years, people don't realize it, but we've been attending CLA for, well, how old's the sanctuary? Plus a year
Oh,
or two.
Jackie and I started attending whenever the sanctuary was opened. That was
Okay.
2004.
Okay. So it was about 2002, maybe the end of 2001 that we went to CLA.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, it's been that, it's probably about 2002 that we started attending CLA. And because our daughter got married, or was attending over there, is why we actually made the move. We'd get to see our children, and then also ultimately our grandchildren. So, which
Good.
my grandson got baptized. You heard us hooting and hollering if you were in the first service. Patrick was the first one.
Oh my goodness, that was
Yeah.
you.
Yeah, that was my daughter. I even leaned over. I said, "You're a big man." She goes, "Just like you, Dad." Yeah, that was us. So that's what happens when you sit up in the balcony. You get away with stuff. And I don't think Pastor Shane could see us up there. He was looking straight back. That was awesome. I said to Nance, we got away with it. But yeah,
Yeah.
that was. Hey, I'm telling you, I'm still bubbling. Nothing better than seeing your children and your grandchildren. Given that commitment to God. I have another grandson getting baptized. He wants Pastor Denny to baptize him in the Yellow Breeches this summer.
Really?
So
Why?
yeah, well, because Hunter's sort of an outdoor fellow. Well, Pastor Denny is actually Hunter's pastor because
Okay.
Hunter works at a veterinarian clinic. He's going to Penn State to be a veterinarian. And I'm telling you, favor of God follows you. And Hunter was only in college for 6 weeks, 5 or 6 weeks, and a veterinarian clinic said, "You want to come be a veterinarian technician or
Mm-hmm.
assistant?" And he got in way ahead. Now he took a lot of courses in high school that prepped him to be able to do those. So it wasn't, but actually he bypassed a lot of kids that were at Penn State studying the same thing.
Good.
And he's a veterinarian assistant on the Carlisle Pike.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know
So
right where he works then.
yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
that's cool.
yeah,
So Pastor Denny's going to baptize Hunter.
yeah. Well, Hunter goes to church on Wednesday nights. So
Okay.
so Hunter says Pastor Denny's my pastor. So, well, if Pastor Shane gives Pastor Denny, and I'm sure he will, but
Yeah,
he
he'll
gives,
let him. Sure.
yeah, yeah.
Sure. That's cool.
Well,
When you have had quite the life, and the way you describe it as a life of favor, I think is spot on. Um, the thing I want to ask, I only have one more question, and that is the thing we didn't cinch up yet is you coming back to the Lord. How did that happen?
well, for a lot of years, and this, like we've talked before, everyone has excuses. But when we came out of Glad Tidings, we practically did everything. I mean, whatever needed to be done, we did it. And that was
Mhm.
a church at the time of 350. Had an awesome minister. Howard Garman was, and he went to CLA until he passed away. But Howard Garman was our senior pastor, and then Jim Grove came after him, if you know that name.
I do know the name, yes.
But when Jim came, and we knew Jim personally because originally he was the youth pastor at Glad Tidings, and so we actually took over the youth group after Pastor Jim had left to go. He was actually the senior pastor at Erie Assembly of God. And but anyway, Jim Grove came back to Glad Tidings, and we told Pastor Jim pretty much whenever he came, listen, we are going to be going. We already knew we were going to CLA. We weren't church shopping. We knew we were already in contact with Pastor Paul and said, we'd like to come over, and you get the bear hug there.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So we were thrilled about that. But Pastor Jim asked us, he goes, Wayne, could you stay on the transition between Pastor Garman? He goes, I know you loved him and whatnot. Can you stay on? And I was on the board at the time. And we said, yeah, whatever we can do to help the ministry. And we tried to do everything we could. And we stayed about a year and a half, I think, after Pastor Jim came to try to ease everything over. And the one thing that we probably didn't do right was we really didn't tell a lot of people we were leaving. And a lot of people were like, what's going on? We know you know something. And it's like, no, we can't give you a bad report because we don't have a bad report.
Mm-hmm.
We know that our children are over there and we long to be able to fellowship with them and our grandchildren.
Yeah, perfect sense.
And so because we've seen church splits, and usually in a church split, somebody will feel so compelled that they feel like they got to drag other people with them. Mm-hmm. Well, this was no church split. This was Wayne and Nancy going to fellowship somewhere else.
Right.
And but because I'll be honest with you, we were tired. I mean, so whenever we got there, Pastor Paul had encouraged us, Wayne, get involved. He goes, soon, I want you teaching and whatnot. And so he had that stamp of encouragement on us also. And we just never we did have a small group that ballooned out so bad that we actually had to stop because nobody would break off and go elsewhere. We averaged around 25 a week.
Wow.
Yeah. And it got big, and our house is medium size. I mean, it's not a large house, but we made it work. And we did that for several years. Really got some really close. Epi and Lisa Siegfried, very close friends came out of that.
I was sure they were family when I first met.
Everybody still thinks that.
Okay.
Yeah, everybody. There's a lot of people that says, "Hey, how's your brother?" Or some people say, "Hey, how's your sister?" It's like, they're doing good, But wow. Yeah. So so we had the small group, but quite honestly, we sit for quite a while, and really didn't get too involved in doing anything. I did ushering, did some things like that I just felt like, I can be here but not be noticed, and sort of hide ourselves, and we did. But it was the beginning of COVID that God actually started to say, you've rested long enough. Now, okay. I've always been, and Nancy has too, we're not afraid to share the gospel anywhere at any time. Mm-hmm. Matter of fact, in grocery stores, if people come up to us, and they do, I mean, it's frequent, because we pray in the morning, Lord, put somebody in our path that we can share the gospel, or if someone needs something, please send them our way. And I'm telling you, he does it. Mm-hmm. But we've been in the middle of the grocery store and stopped right there and prayed right there. Usually you call here with a prayer request, or we see it online. You can rest assured, Nancy and I, we usually grab hold of a hand, and we'll make that prayer immediately. Mm-hmm. Because this was instilled in me also. A lot of people tell you they're praying for you, but they forget to do it. Or I'm not throwing stones. I'm just saying, if I tell you I need prayer and you pray for me right away, I know you prayed for me,
Yep. You're right.
you know? And so it's that confirmation of, you know what, they'll do what they say they'll do. And so God got a hold of us and said, you know what, you have a work. We don't know what it is yet. Well, Nancy says she knows, and I'm still waiting on the Lord what that work is.
Okay.
But I know that her work is already, I mean, her phone every day is lit up. And quite honestly, I could talk to someone every day too. I don't always every day, but that are rubbing and getting stronger.
Yeah. Well,
So
you're certainly willing servants. The Lord's not going to let that go to waste for sure.
no.
Well, Wayne, anything else you want to say? I mean, YouTube lives forever. Well, that's
Yeah.
a little exaggeration.
Yeah.
But if the Lord tarries, you could have great grandchildren, great great grandchildren. They could hear your testimony. So, anything else to say to them, maybe?
Well, to my family, and they know this, but I will say it for even past my grandchildren. I didn't know what Pastor Shane was going to preach on Sunday morning, and he ended his message on the bloodline of people that spoke into his life.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I had already planned. I had my father's preaching Bible that I was giving to. I have Bibles from my grandparents and from my dad, and because of the blessing that the Bible talks about, putting on your children and your grandchildren and their children, I felt when Patrick told us, and we never asked any of our grandkids to get baptized. We didn't nothing like that. But I just felt impressed earlier in the week. Nancy said, "What are you going to do for Patrick's baptism?" And I said, "I already know what I'm doing." I said, "I'm giving him one of Dad's Bibles." And I wasn't quite sure which one. And so we got the three out that I have designed. I have three grandsons, Hunter, Patrick, and Declan. And I have a granddaughter. We have a Bible design already picked out for Cadence out of Nancy's grandmother, her great grandmother, that will go to Cadence. But the three that I had from my father, we began to open them up, and I was looking at his notes and some of the stuff that was falling out and whatever. And here came the obituary of Patrick's great grandfather, who had passed away. He was a Army vet. He was 90. Well, I don't want to get it wrong. He was in his 90s, I think late 90s. And I actually preached his funeral over at Indian Town Gap.
Nice.
And it was powerful, but the PowerPoint on it was in there, and that came right out. And Nancy looked at me, and I said, "We already know which one's Patrick's." And so on Sunday morning after the service was over, we met upstairs on the landing, and I gave him my dad's Bible, and I told him, I said, this Bible has blessed me. Well, it came from my grandparents, but it went from my grandparents to my father, through me into you. The blessing of the Lord in every word. If you walk this out, that he will be with you every step you take, and he'll be the light to your path. And so that testimony right there, to generation. Nancy and I have a habit of praying blessings over our family. We make it a point. We make it a point to tell them that they're favored. We make it a point to tell them there's nothing they can do that will outrun God's love. If they come back to him, that they will find him, and he will be there. So we make it a point to tell our family how to stay tight with God. So I don't know anymore. I've seen some of you guys' other testimonies, and you asked a question at the end, what would you want them to say about you? And Nancy listened to those testimonies with me. Well, I've preached 3 funerals so far. I'm not a minister, but I've preached 3 funerals.
Good.
And at the end of all 3 of those, I've asked a question: what will they say about you? What
Wow.
will they say about me? And so I would say for me that I was just a man that was highly favored, that finally heard the voice of the Lord say, serve all your days for me. And
Wow.
so walk that way.
Well, Wayne, I think that's a perfect spot to let it. You've got a powerful testimony. I know the rest of the crew will be anxious to hear it, so I'll get it published tomorrow. And God bless you, brother. Thanks for your time.
Oh, absolutely. No, thank you for what you do. I appreciate it very much.
Well, yeah, you're more than welcome.